right. There we go. Welcome to Talk of Christ, Faith, Family, and Adventure. My name is Steve Hunt, and we are going to do a panel discussion today that is kind of a thought experiment. Looks like we lost Marty for a second. Hopefully she'll jump back on here. But it was her idea. But anyway, the question is, what would it be like? How would you react? What would you do if suddenly your local church congregation, maybe even your denomination as a whole, were suddenly gone or closed down? And then we wanted to take that a little bit further too and talk about what if all of religion vanished, disappeared, including, all records and history and scripture and prophets, and where would you go from there? So this is kind of just a discussion thought experiment. Who would like to start with their thoughts into, let's just keep it local first. What would you do if the congregation that you were worshiping with suddenly vanished from the picture? How would that change anything? Corey, do you want to take that first?
Sure. I mean, the funny thing about that part is, last year we kind of faced something similar to that, right? With COVID, at least, as far as religion went, I mean, they were still there. We had neighbors, but everyone was shut in for a little while. And so I still, to my kids liked it a lot better. We had church in about 15 minutes usually, but I just, I followed, I guess if I didn't have any records or anything, but, we followed a simple lesson, and I'm not sure which way to take this, because from my mind it vanished, or is I just woke up one day and they're gone, or or we're saying, did it never exist, and do you think you turn out the same or something?
I think in this case, where we're just talking about the congregation, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, because this was kind of your idea, but where your congregation, your local ward or whatever just disappeared, it's not vanishing from your mind in this case. In the later experiment where we talk about all of religion and history, that's more of a, let's forget everything, let's pretend like clean slate. But in this case, you just suddenly, what's a good example? I don't know. Marty, how did you put it?
I have a good example. Let's just say you stop believing in the church you're going to, then where do you go?
Well, that's okay. What she's trying to get at with the whole question. Okay. But basically your congregation no longer serves you. And the hypothetical was, it's just gone. It can't serve you anymore.
Gotcha. All right. Well, in that case, no, I can totally relate, and I would get that. Just, suddenly your community is foreign to you, or alien, or you're other now. Where would I go? If I'm honest, I'd probably go to people that were, if there are still people, I'd find the people that our relationship was not founded on that, and hopefully most of my relationships aren't based solely on if I believe the same way as them. I know a lot of people around where I live, at least, would be they have a kind of a monolith, I would say, of political and religious views in my particular neighborhood, and that shows up from time to time. And so, I'm sure if I, for example, stopped believing in the church, it might ostracize me from some of the neighbors, but I got other neighbors too that I like, and they don't go to church at all. So I don't know if that's where you want to take it.
I'm muted. Sorry. I'll jump in next, just simply because I'm the only other one present who hasn't totally walked away at some point from their congregation. So then we'll hear from those who have. But I have moved 17 some odd times as an adult, and another 16 or 17 times as a child. I've moved over 30 plus times. My family got together once, and we literally had a competition of who's moved the most of all the brothers and sisters and my parents and whatever. And I can't remember who had the most unstable life. Anyway, but so I've moved congregation to congregation just all the time. I'm not connected to any one particular congregation, but as far as of course, religious support, I've been attending Latter-day Saint congregations, mostly, not exclusively. I've visited other churches, but for much of my life. And so if my ward disappeared, I'd be like, huh, that's weird. And I'd go to a different ward. But if my church up and vanished and they're without a trace or whatever, certainly I would take the principles that I hold most dear and that I teach to my children and continue to follow those and practice those. And I suppose it's helpful to have a congregation, a group, a neighborhood that supports you in those beliefs and principles as you're teaching and raising your children, because it takes a village, as we've heard. And so to have the village around me with similar beliefs and ideals that I can discuss. I mean, already I don't 100% have the same beliefs and ideals, never have, as the people in my congregation. So it doesn't seem like it would be too hard of a stretch for me to attend some other congregation, non-Latter-day Saint, with my current beliefs and ideals, maintaining them, studying scripture with them, worshiping with them, and just having differences of opinion in the way that I do currently, I guess. So that's my answer to that. Joey, you want to go next?
Well, all right. So my perspective on this is different, naturally. So it's for better or worse, it's actually normal for an evangelical congregation to just implode and go away. Especially in like non-denominational churches, or if it's so there's different forms of church government. I don't want, there's a whole tangent I could go off for an hour, but like different denominations have their churches organized in different ways, right? And a lot of Baptist churches are what is called the congregational form of church government, where each local congregation, they probably own their own building, they have their own maybe board of trustees or whatever, and it's basically the church is built around the pastor, maybe one charismatic pastor who like founded the church, and the church is kind of built around him. So if he's caught in some kind of scandal, or for whatever reason, there's a large percentage of the congregation has a falling out with the pastor, it can cause a split, and half the congregation will just take off, or it might even result in the implosion of that whole congregation, right? That's the negative situation. But the positive situation is, okay, so you have a huge advantage being Latter-day Saint, in that when you move to a different town, what you do when you get there is you just look up the local LDS ward that you're in, and you just start going to that church, right?
Well, first you have them move you in. It's important that they come move you in first, but yeah.
Right, the elders come and help you move in, right? And yeah, but in the evangelical world, in the Protestant world, you can't really do that. Like when you move to a new town, you have to open up the phone book and figure out, all right, where you have to find a church, where are we going to go to church? And
how do you do that? How do you pick the spot?
Yeah, how do you do that? So I say it's like I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage. I think it's a huge advantage that you have, that you can just, I just look up the local church and I'm off to the races, right? I don't have to like do any kind of search. So it's kind of a disadvantage in that sense, is that it might take you a couple of months to get really plugged in at a local church again once you've moved, or what happens. So this happened to me and my wife. We decided, for reasons, and I don't want to get into any of the reasons here, and I don't want to name names in case anybody at that church is watching. But it wasn't a falling out with anybody in particular at the church. We love all of those people. We still love them. If we run into them, out in public, we say, hey, we're still in touch on Facebook and all that. But for reasons, we just decided we couldn't attend that church anymore. And so it took us about 3 months to find the church that we're currently plugged into. And I knew I had some general, like I knew I wanted to attend a Reformed church. We had attended a church up in Bozeman, Montana, actually, when we were visiting you guys, Steve and Marissa. We were visiting you guys. I don't know when that was, back in like 2010 or even earlier, probably. Lindsay was still a little.
It had to have been before 2011. That's when we moved away.
Yeah. And when we were there, we attended a church that was now I'm going to forget what it was. It might've been a United Reformed church. What was that church? But we really liked it. And so when we started thinking several years later, hey, let's try to find a new church, that was the first thing I did is I looked up, are there any of those, locally? And there were none, and that's the problem. If I moved somewhere else where there weren't, so I'm currently in a denomination called the Presbyterian Church in America. If I moved to someplace, the first thing I would do is look up, where's the local PCA church? And if there isn't one, then I have a problem, right? But it's not a huge problem because of the way denominationalism works. The fragmentation of evangelicalism or the fragmentation of Protestantism is actually kind of a positive thing, in that it kind of doesn't matter. Like I can find another church that's close enough to my denomination and get plugged in there and things will be fine. And it is a little bit of what Steve was saying going on, like, whatever minor disagreements I have with people in my current congregation, I might have this similar kinds of, minor concerns about whatever church I end up at. But at the end of the day, it will be fine as long as we agree on, certain specific core issues, right? So, yeah, I think a lot of evangelicals and Protestants are just kind of used to this idea of like, well, occasionally I just have to find a new church to attend, and so on the one hand, I think this question is kind of motivated by you're so used to just when I move into a new place, I just look up the local LDS ward, that you don't know what you would do if that just wasn't an option.
Wasn't available. The question, as you're looking to find one though, how do you find one? How do you determine this is the one we're comfortable in? I apologize if you kind of answered that, but I still don't feel like I would know what to do to find because like I just said, I think I could slide in and go to church with you, Joey. In fact, your church is one of the closest buildings to my house.
You can walk to
even
church.
though you live clear across the valley, so you come all the way over here, which is why you're here often in my home on Sundays, to attend church a block away from my house. I might just go there, if I couldn't go to my local LDS ward, just because it's nearby. But I mean, if I'm believing the Bible, then where do you draw the line as to where do you attend?
Well, I mean, certainly I'm looking for a Trinitarian church. When I said I'm looking for a Reformed church, I'm looking for someone who affirms the doctrines of grace, Calvinism, roughly speaking. Like I'm looking for a church that's Calvinist in their views on how salvation works. I'm looking for a church who preaches through the Bible chapter by chapter and doesn't go through topically. And I don't know, I guess these are personal preferences on one hand. I don't know, like, but what I'm looking for, and maybe I'm a weirdo, but what I'm looking for is doctrinal fidelity, right? I'm looking for a church that I agree with doctrinally. And one thing that really attracted me to the church I'm going to now is that they have this confessional document, and all the pastors, anybody who's ordained in the church has to assent to that doctrinal statement. And it's 33 sections long. It's got a lot of specific content in it, right? A lot of churches will have like a short doctrinal statement, and then it's very loosey-goosey after that. One of the churches we looked at, so I'll give you an example. One of the churches we looked at was the Evangelical Free Church of Salt Lake City. And the pastor was very Reformed. The pastor, doctrinally, I think the pastor was right on a lot of the things he believed. But the problem was that there was nothing that would stop that church. If that pastor decides he's retiring or he's taking a new call somewhere else, and now they're about to call a new pastor, there are no guidelines on what kind of pastor they should call. There's no doctrinal statement that they would hold a guy to, and they might end up calling a new pastor who has very different, right? Very different doctrinal views as the pastor before him, right? And what I liked about the church that we attend now is that they hold to this confessional standard, and they would not call any pastor that doesn't agree with that doctrinal statement. And so that creates stability. It creates, I don't know, like on the one hand, it creates like homogeneity, right? Like same, like there's no diversity at all. And you would hope that's not the case, but like, I don't know. I like the idea of that having that foundational confessional document and having that standard, so that I know, even if the pastoral staff changes, even if the, people come and go, like the church isn't going to change. And so that was one thing that attracted me. I don't know. I could probably have a longer list of what attracted me to this particular congregation, but
interesting. So, Marty, having heard some of our thoughts about what we might do if our congregation disappeared, what are your thoughts now? And what are your thoughts in general? And maybe you can share, why you asked the question and what you're thinking about.
Yeah. So, I've actually been in the YouTube comment section, like apologetic Christian channels, and so I bumped into some ex-Mormon Christians. So I was talking to a gal. I actually talked to her on the phone earlier today and just asking her about her journey and stuff. And no, it fascinates me. That's kind of the question I have right now. I don't have an answer because that's what I'm trying to figure out. So I was just trying to poke your guys' brains and figure out what would be the method. Because it's interesting, because one of the things that bothers me about communities in general is that it's kind of an echo chamber, right? So, but at the same time, if you don't have core beliefs, then you don't have anything in common to keep you together. So it's like a paradox. So I don't know how to solve that paradox. Anyway, those are some of the thoughts I have. I don't know. I'm very fascinated by Joey's example, because that is very foreign to an LDS person, which is definitely my background. Like how, and it's interesting that you say, oh, it's very common. Like you move and you do have to find a church. And that was always like a plus when I was believing, like, I don't have to I know where I go.
And,
like, this is where I go.
And I'm not disagreeing with that.
Family.
I think it is a plus. It's just this automatic, I know right where I'm going. There's something really good about that.
It certainly makes it easier to find your place, to find friends, to fit in, as opposed to, several months after a move, still not knowing who your friends are and things.
Yeah.
So.
I look back on a lot of aspects of the Latter-day Saint, like the way people are assigned callings, right? You're assigned a job to do at church. That does not happen in my church, and it didn't happen in the Baptist church that I attended. And a lot of people consequently just never get involved in anything at the church. They just come and they let church wash over them, like it's the weekly entertainment, and then they go home.
And you're saying families are probably supporting everything.
Right. There's a small core group of people that's like doing everything in the church. And
it still happens in the LDS church though, too. Yeah. Certain people are called and moved around from presidency to presidency.
Yeah. And I don't know, but then what that means is if people are choosing their own, I want to get into this section of the ministry, or I want to do that, then the advantage is that person is really plugged in, right? They want to serve in that way. It wasn't just an assigned job, right? I see pros and cons. Like there's not like one like best way to do church. And I think Latter-day Saints do a lot of things that are like, oh, that's actually a really smart way to do it, but yeah, so I want to get back to what you just said, Marty, about like the echo chamber, because I worried about that. So the church that we were at, which was a Baptist church, Southern Baptist church, one of the pastors was, I'm going to use big $5 words. I'm sorry. When I say I was looking for a church that's Reformed, I was looking for a church that more Calvinist leaning in the way that they understand salvation. One of the pastors was Calvinist leaning, and the other pastor was Arminian leaning, which is the opposite of Calvinism. And very frequently, when that would come up in a sermon, if they're preaching on like Romans or some verse that was about salvation, the very Arminian leaning pastor would often invite the Calvinist leading pastor up, and they would like tag team the sermon and be like, here's how I understand this verse. Here's how Pastor John understands this verse. And we're still buddies, right? We're still friends. Like it's okay for us to have this difference of opinion about how to interpret these passages. At the end of the day, we both agree that X, some core subset of what they believe is true. And we can agree to disagree on all the rest, And I always loved when they did that. It was like so refreshing and cool that they would, in front of everyone else at the pulpit, acknowledge we have a difference of opinion on this, and that's cool. That's okay. And I worried about exactly that. Okay. I had kind of come to the conclusion that I'm pretty sure Pastor John is right more of the time than Pastor Mike. I said I wasn't going to name names. I'm naming names. I absolutely adore Pastor Mike. He's one of my dearest friends. Honestly, he taught our Sunday school class for years and years, and we got to know him and his wife really well. And they're awesome people. But I had a doctrinal disagreement with him, right? And I felt like I leaned more toward Pastor John's point of view most of the time. And so it came down to like, well, I think I want to find a church that is really going to lean into that instead of, going back and forth. I want to find a church that leans into that because that's where I'm at. And I worried about exactly that, Marty. I was like, yeah, but then I'm going to go into this echo chamber where everyone's going to just agree with that all the time, and no one's ever going to question it, or, and for me, it was a trade-off I wanted to make, because I felt pretty solid. Like, I'm in that camp. I don't feel like I'm going to, and do I feel like I'm missing now some of those interactions? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
well, you get them with me.
Trade-off. I get them with you guys. Yeah. We all have our arguments here, so I don't have to get it at church anymore. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting. I think
that is like,
well,
go ahead.
I don't know. I could say a lot more, but I don't need to. Go ahead, Corey.
I was gonna say that's like one of the core things that I wish we had a lot more of in the LDS world, is just, and I understand early on they did, and maybe that led to some chaos of just like, differing opinions. But what I wish we had is a range of options where it's like, hey, obviously some things are vague and you could go this way with it, you could go this way with it, you could go this way. They're all valid ways, and we obviously don't know, but that's a wide range of beliefs, and you are open. And I think like sort of unsaid in our doctrine, you can do that. You can, and I do, in a lot of ways, but like sort of more said is like, I don't know, like I went, well, I'll tell you. So we actually just split or I didn't do it, but our ward split, and we got moved into a new ward. And so our block is like completely new, and it is nice. They come and we're plugged in already. We have like just our other set of neighbors. But like, honestly, what's funny, I keep joking with people, is like the set of, because like we're just on this switch street, and like the set of neighbors that weren't in our ward, we literally don't know them. Like they're across the street from us, and like that whole block, I don't know them. The block that was in my ward, we know them, and we lived here for like 6 years. So I'm like, that's kind of a crappy thing that happens around here. And so I felt bad about that, but
At least
didn't know
some
you,
of them, because when there's no church, nobody.
Well, yeah, that's true. And then that happens in Utah to those people too. It's like, then if they're not a member, they're just pariahs in the community, and that's not cool. At least they can be. Anyway, so we're with these people, and like it's fun because I'm like, it's weird because like I was in nursery before, and so I'm like, I was cut off from everyone, and I didn't really talk to anybody anyway. So like to me, the experience isn't that different. So I'm here, and like I don't know anybody still, but like, or I didn't get it, but it is interesting. Like every ward has their own dynamic and like their lingo and like stuff that they're just okay with, and like this ward seems to be a little more open with just assuming everyone's super conservative. And we had a comment, like I'm still conservative, but like I'm more, I try to be independent, right? But I'm somewhere in between. But we had all these interesting comments today about global warming and how we don't need to worry about that and other stuff like that. And I was like, and you're just assuming that everyone's okay with this? I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, that's my first week here, so I probably shouldn't start this yet, but eventually I'm going to start making little comments here and there, But anyway, I think I had a point in there somewhere. Oh, so I had that. I had the plus of saying like, I am in a completely different congregation. It has kind of vanished from me, and like hopefully those people that were our friends will still be our friends. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we're out of sight, out of mind now, right? And then we got this new set of friends. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic that happens. And I don't know if this is everywhere, but at least in Utah, since there's so many wards.
It's definitely interesting that socially, I mean, you look at your friends, who do you hang out with? Who do you do things with? And there's only a few groups. You're going to hang out with people from your church and congregation. And so if you don't have that, you're missing that entire, potential set of friends. You're going to hang out with some work buddies, and it depends on, whether you have the same kind of family setup and whether your families can hang out, or whether you're just going to hang out, as to whether you're actually going to be social outside of work with your work buddies. And then you're going to hang out from time to time with the friends that have been your friends the longest. You're going to see your high school buddies or whatever, from time to time. And then, of course, family. Is there another group that people hang out with? I mean, some people really do get to know their neighbors and have block parties and things, but I think that's pretty rare. And otherwise, it's just kind of, if you're missing a church congregation, that's one of the things that I think we're missing. Am I wrong about that? That you miss out on that friendship group? Marty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking, there's something funny about about friends you make like outside of church. So I made a couple of really good friends in Colorado. One was a Catholic gal that we had kids that lined up. We both had 2 tiny kids and we were both pregnant. So we hit it off, exchanged numbers, and she moved out of our neighborhood about an hour away, and she stayed friends with me. And it was like, well, that's weird. So she moved away and we're still friends. Whereas like in a ward, it's like someone moves out of the ward and they fall off the face of the earth, and you never, I mean, Facebook helps a little bit with that, but you really don't keep in touch with those people that you connect with in your ward very often. Sometimes you do. We made some lifelong friends in Colorado that we stay in touch with now. Probably about 2 or 3 families. Like we just met up with one because they were traveling to Idaho. And so they stopped in and said hi. And we have some lifelong friends, but I would say it's nice having that automatic family, but it's also kind of a superficial automatic family too. So
Can be.
it's just interesting. Certainly not the whole 200 people in your ward you're going to know forever.
No,
because that's
yeah.
just too many people to have in your social mind, right? To keep those relationships going. So those are some of the thoughts I had. The other thing I thought, your thought, Corey, how you were saying how you wish there was a little bit more diversity, socially acceptable in an LDS congregation. It's interesting though, because I think that the limit of that is why it's so easy to move to another place and still be able to find a home, because it's known and it's expected. It's there. So it's like there's pluses and minuses of both. But yeah, those are some of my thoughts, I guess.
I don't want to go to this ward. This ward's too conservative. The one next door is
it just doesn't happen. It's geographical. So it's really nice how it's kind of cool how you get the diversity if you allow people to talk. You do have your liberal person in your ward. You're like, oh, I don't know about them,
that's
right?
like, I know they're there, and I'm like,
I'm that person. I'm completely extremely moderate, but I'm the liberal person in the ward for sure.
You got to at
what
least
was that, Joey?
steel man their opinion.
You said extremely moderate. I love that phrase. Extremely moderate.
That's my political views. I am extremely moderate. So yeah, I wanted to dive in to this second half of the question. We've taken most of the time on the first half, but the idea of what if religion, your religion specifically, but even all religion, just completely vanished from the face of the earth without a trace, and we suddenly had no scripture, no history, nobody knew any of the religions, and we're all starting over as a 7 billion population of Adams and Eves, and no idea of God or whatever. And what would that do? What would you do? And where do you think things would go? Who wants to jump in on that for a second?
Go real
I just want to make
go
go
right ahead.
Marty, you get to start this time.
Well, no, I just wanted to frame it another way. Richard Dawkins has that quote, right? That if all parents stopped teaching their kids, that religion would die in one generation. So that comment actually hit me at my core, because during my doubting years, when I was like, I have the desire to believe, so I'm going to keep supporting this. I'm like, ooh, is that ethical? Is that the right thing to do? If I don't teach this, is this going to just die off? And the only reason it's there is because I'm teaching my kids that, anyway, so that's kind of, yeah.
So what do you think about that phrase? Do you agree with him or disagree? What are your thoughts?
I think when you truly believe it, I'm totally okay with it. But that is where I struggle. Like I personally I didn't feel honest doing it. Like it was eating at me. Like it didn't feel good. I don't know how to describe it in any other way. It just, I don't, does that make sense? Like, I don't know. That's what my problem was. That's where I struggled. And I think I could have stayed if people knew where I was, but there are assumptions that are made because you're there. Does that make sense?
What do you think would happen if all the parents didn't teach their children for a generation or so, and then suddenly all the parents died? I mean, really, when you think about it, Marty, what do you think would happen? I'm just your own opinion.
So I think there would be some lost wisdom, because I think sometimes we are teaching things that we don't understand where the wisdom is coming from, right? So like, for example, if we erased the Bible, I think in so many generations, we'd have similar threads of truth that would show up again. I think, I feel like we're religious. So even the people that don't claim to be religious are religious still. if that makes sense. Like you still are tribal, you are still, Jonathan Haidt put it this way. He said, we're terrible truth finders. We don't know how to find truth very well. And it actually takes us talking to people that disagree with us for us to actually find truth. So and I really like that. So I think some of these ancient wisdom type things, I think you'd start to see those develop again. It might be slightly different, but I think they'd come back. Does that answer your question?
Sure. In fact, I'll just jump in there and say, I use this here, the thing that I'm about to share to the screen in 1 second, a little diagram. Let's see, I guess I got to make this bigger. Whoop. And you guys see the golden rule diagram made by the Scarborough Missions. And I'm not sure who that is. And so I'm hoping that this is an accurate representation of these religions. I don't know for certain. I know that, it has the Christian here, in everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. And then we have how much of this is really, let's see, native spirituality. We are as much alive as we keep the earth alive. That's an interesting, not direct quote of the golden rule. Do not do unto others whatever is injurious to yourself. One should treat all creatures in the world as one would like to be treated. What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole Torah. All the rest is commentary. Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. Lay not on any soul a load that you would not wish to be laid upon you, and desire not for anyone the things you would not desire for yourself. This is the sum of duty. Do not do to others what would cause pain if done to you. Treat not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. One word which sums up the basis of all good conduct: loving kindness. Do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. Regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. I'm a stranger to no one, and no one is a stranger to me. Indeed, I am a friend to all. That's interesting as well. And in Unitarianism, I skipped here. We affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we're a part. And I don't know, I tend to look at that and say, here's something that probably would come back out within a generation, is this idea of treating others with kindness in the way you'd like to be treated, and not treating others a way that you would not like to be treated, just because it seems to be prevalent everywhere, not just in religion. But I think that most, secular societies have the same kind of belief. And so this one rule for life would emerge, in my opinion. And the funny thing is that, at least in Christianity, we have Jesus saying that this is the second great commandment, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so I guess what I'm saying with this is, if religion completely vanished and scripture were gone and Jesus's words were gone and everything, it seems to me very likely that very quickly humanity would drift back towards the second great commandment as being something very important and good. So that would at least come back. I wanted to mention that about your statement there, that some things would come back. What other thoughts others have?
Yeah, real quick. I was thinking, well, two things, I guess. So I guess I'll do this one first. So like, if you're if you assume your religion is true and there really is a God and a Jesus and all that, and like he did appear at some point, I guess Mormonism would answer to like, oh, well, if that was erased, or like something happened and like everyone's memory got erased and like we suddenly all got teleported to a different planet and we didn't know what was happening and we just started again, Jesus, God would appear to them and reveal to them. That's probably what the Mormons, a Mormon person would answer, like, oh, well, God clearly can reveal his word, and therefore he would, if there is a God, he would do that. And as far as like the actual secular answer, it's along the lines of what Steve is saying, is like, well, there's certain things that to have a civilization at all, you have to agree on, as far as like morality and like, the 10 Commandments type ideas would emerge in a lot of societies. Obviously the stories, the mythologies, and the nuances of the belief system would vary wildly, as we can see. If you just look at all those world religions, like that core thing is in common, but they go very different directions as far as like why it's that way and all that. So
yeah, the question when Richard Dawkins or whoever puts forward this idea and says, if we stop teaching our children religion, it would disappear in a generation, us, bakes into it the assumption that there is no God. If there were no God, yeah, you're probably right. We would get this kind of a love one another, morality that would permeate society. And then we would once again get a whole spread of different religions as we have. And so Richard Dawkins and others look at it and say, see, this is what you get. You get a whole bunch of different religions, and maybe they're right, but if God is real, is Israel? Yes. If God is real, then the God of Israel, then you get a revelation again of the same things. And so the answer back, of course, is no. We would have it that knowledge restored. An interesting secondary point is that many religions do find a common theme along the lines of, of course, because religion is focused around and built around what happens after death and resurrection and that kind of idea. And then you get common themes around God coming to earth as human. You get sacrifice. You get family things. So there are many themes that would rebuild and that find themselves in, and the question is, do these all come back, and do many religions believe the same sorts of themes and things because they're coming from God, or because there's some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Evolutionary.
Evolutionary survival mechanism.
Yeah, survival thing. Anyway, Joey, Marty, what are your thoughts on this experiment of religion completely vanishing? What do you think would be like? And
I would just echo what Corey said. I happen to believe that God is really real. So on the one hand, I don't think God would even let that happen. But if it did happen somehow, I don't think it would surprise him at all. And he would just find a way to fix it. He would find a way to bring knowledge of him back. And while it's interesting that you can find the second great commandment in every world religion, I don't think you can find the first great commandment in every world religion. I think that has to be a revealed truth. God has to come and reveal that to us. So
I agree with that.
I don't think if that happened, I don't think people would spontaneously start to worship Yahweh again, right? Like Yahweh has to tell us about himself so that we can worship him again. And I believe he would. That is not an interesting answer to the question. As the question's been posed, I want to go back to the way that you kind of framed the first question, Marty. It wasn't so much a hypothetical weird sci-fi scenario where my church got abducted by aliens or just disappeared. It's what if I lost faith in it, right? What if religion ceased to exist in the sense that it ceased to exist for me, right? And when I was talking about like, oh, here's what I would go, if I had to find a new congregation, here's what I would go do. That was all based on the assumption that I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a church that aligns with these doctrinal distinctives that I align with, right? And in this scenario, if it all ceases to exist, and if it all ceases to exist in the sense that I stop believing in it all, right? What do I do then if I want to get plugged into a new social group, right? That gives my life meaning beyond just being a social group, right? I have no idea what I would do, to be honest with you. I would like to say that I've been through that once before, but I kind of haven't. When I left the LDS church, I already had a congregation that my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, was attending, and I just plugged in there, and it wasn't until 8-10 years later that I started to realize, this church doesn't quite align with some of the doctrinal distinctives that I'm finding in the Bible. And that's what precipitated our leaving that church and finding a new one. But it took me that long to really get settled in my mind so much of the doctrinal issues, right? And I really appreciated being in that church for those 8 or 10 years because it was a very open church about like, hey, there's 2 or 3 different ways to think about this question. And we're going to explain all of them so that you can come to your own conclusion, right? And I appreciated that because it helped me to solidify in my mind, I think I like option B. Or I think not just that I like it, but I think it really aligns the best with what the Bible is saying about this topic, right? And so I kind of graduated from that church into the church now that does follow those more doctrinal distinctives. But again, all of that assumes that you know what you're looking for, right? In your hypothetical scenario, I've stopped believing in so much of what I believed in, and now I'm looking for something new. I don't know what I would do. I guess I would have to go into some kind of seeking mode of just like, well, let's check everything out, go to the buffet and sample everything, and try to figure out where I'm going to go from here. Right. I don't know. I don't have an interesting answer. I think my answer is uninteresting, that, oh, God is real and he's just going to reveal it all. I think that's the right answer, but I realize it's an uninteresting answer to the question. I don't think I have an interesting one. Other than to just say, I have no idea. I think I would be lost. I think I would really go into a deep depression, to be honest with you. And so.
Yeah. No, nihilism is real.
Yeah.
Well,
nihilism scares the crap out of me. I'm too much of a coward to stop believing in God. I'm too scared to stop believing in God.
Nihilism attacks me in the middle of the night, of two out of 3 nights.
that actually, I went through a phase of that where it was just like, well, dude, how do you get motivation to do anything if you have no aim? And that's kind of where when you really take that to the end of it, that's what it is. A lot of people like to deny that that's a thing, but it is a thing. I was reading something Tolstoy wrote, and I'm not even sure if this was even related to what he was writing. But I remember thinking, like, a dog, for example, has such little understanding. They could never read a book. You can never teach a dog to read a book. And so I was just like, is that where we are? Like, we have so little understanding of what's out there. And so even nihilism to me is almost, you have to take it on faith, like that I know enough about my reality that it's meaningless. Like, you really do have to take a leap of faith to even say that. And so I decided
that's funny. I like that quote. It's very similar to what I shared with my kids this week, just a couple of days ago. I just said, I'm convinced there's a God because of things and events that have happened in my life and the way that I felt the Spirit and things that have happened to my family and my parents and the ways that I've read the scriptures and I have my faith in God and in the few other things that I have faith in. And there are so many things I just don't understand. I feel like I didn't say a dog trying to read, but I said a baby, looking out at the universe. And, if an adult talks to a baby, the baby's just like, I got no idea anything you're saying. And so I'm happy to say, I have a loving Heavenly Father who's taking care of me. And beyond that, I don't have a clue what he's up to, And so that's where kind of my faith is on that. Joey, you wanted to?
Well, I was just going to say it's relevant to my recent experience. I had shoulder surgery 2 Thursdays ago, and I had about 4 or 5 days off work while I was recovering, and everything is going great. And that's not really what I'm meaning to comment on, but I found myself in those 4 or 5 days with nothing to do, and what should I have done? Right. I've got like 4 or 5, half a dozen different projects buzzing around in my brain that like, hey, the next time I get some downtime, I should do these projects. Did I do any of them? No, I did not. And honestly, I started to go a little crazy. I started to get really stir crazy. Like, I just want to go back to work. And I was talking with my mom about it. And she was like, yeah, if I don't think if we hadn't planted our pretty large garden this year, I think I would be going a little nuts. But it's nice to just, I wake up in the morning and I know there's something I have to do today. I have an aim, I have a goal, I have a job to do, and as humans, I think we need that. So, or we fall into that very nihilistic, nothing matters, and I think we all need to do a little self-care in terms of like, make sure you have some, goal that you're working toward or some job that is like your job to do, or you go a little nuts. And so I'm very happy to be back at work again. But
we wake up tomorrow. We can't remember anything our parents taught us about God. We have no religious leaders or ties. We have our jobs, we have our families, and we have no scripture around and none of our regular religious rituals. And what do you think changes? We've said an awful lot in the last few minutes, this idea that many of our minds might drift towards a nihilistic what's this all for? What's the point? Why am I doing this? And the funny thing is, we do that already sometimes from time to time without the religion or whatever. I guess it would be great to have one of our truly solid atheist friends on the call with us here to tell us how they deal with that, you know. So, but are there any additional thoughts to wrap this up as to what would happen in that instance? Where do you think you would take yourself, your family, to find some kind of meaning in life in that moment?
So my husband, I should have him on. He's closer to what you're describing. He bases his like his family, his immediate family. He knows he loves his family and he wants to serve them, and that's kind of where it's rooted. And that makes me uncomfortable. It's like, well, what if we all die in a car crash? Are you just going to kill yourself? Like what's like, this is problematic. I feel like there should be I don't know, there's like the God-shaped hole in your heart. Like what is the ultimate meaning and purpose? But he's also coming to like more of a, I don't know, pantheist. It would probably be the best description of it. Just like God is in everything. And so there is meaning in life, and it's in all of us, and it's in the whole, like you think of your body's made up of a whole bunch of cells, and maybe that's what we are as a body of humans. So he kind of has a, I don't know, he still gets a little meaning. He really has like moments where he just feels that, and he's like, there is meaning and purpose in that way. So I don't know. There's other ways to look at it, I think, without the there's a lot of other kinds of beliefs in a God that I think would look functionally atheist, but they're pulling meaning. And I almost wonder if we define God too rigidly, so that they are like, I don't believe in God, but they really are believing in God. I've wondered that when I look at ancient writings about God. I'm like, I'm not sure that this has to be a personal God when they say this. Like this could be a more broad God. And that's why I have a hard time using atheist. It's like, tell me your definition of God, then I'll tell you if I believe in that God or not. Like, so anyway.
Corey, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I posted this on something. I'm not gonna read it, but I saw a cool video and been reading the wisdom book in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, and I find lately I'm kind of aligning more with that book, which is like a really kind of, it starts out with like a very pessimistic view of life. It nails home. It's like, here's the thing. You don't remember people from, a few thousand years ago for the most part, and a few thousand years from now, no one's going to remember you. Your existence is a blip, and on the grand scheme of things, you're nothing, basically. And in the end, we're all going to die, and we're not sure if, no one's exactly sure what's going to happen after this life. We hope for this thing, but nobody knows. And all the lives that we're making, everything we're building toward, is just going to end that way, if we're rich, poor, whatever. And then life's nature is random. In Ecclesiastes, like, the race doesn't always go to the swift or the battle to the strong. And basically, like, no matter what you do, you're not guaranteed success, which is kind of going against the book of Proverbs in a way where it's like,
I'm sorry, this is the Old Testament you're quoting? I'm just kidding. Keep going. Keep going.
Anyways, like if you do wisdom, or if you have wisdom, you're gonna, God will bless you and it'll work out. But he's just like, you know what, you can do that, and it's probably good to do that, but there's no guarantee. You could still, everything could, that, like, you could die, you could get sickness, you could lose everything. But the wisdom that I really like from him, which I think I would take if, like, religion as a whole vanished, is like, hey, there's basically everything in your life. You can control what you think you can, but in the end, you don't have control over everything or over anything, pretty much. So what you should do, stop worrying about that. Enjoy a good conversation with a friend, or the sun on your face, or a good meal with people you care about. Celebrate the simple things in life, because he says they're gifts from God. And then there's two authors in it. There's like the teacher, and then the author of the actual thing. He comes in at the end, he tries to drive home. He's like, but anyway, it's like, watch out, that's a little depressing. The point is, you should still fear God and do what you're supposed to do, because one day he'll make it all right. But he's just saying, focusing on this life, we just don't know exactly what's going to happen. So, quit trying to control your life and just enjoy the things that you can, and that's what you got.
Love it. I think my brother Dave, who is not on this call, has recently also brought up Ecclesiastes and the nihilistic principles there too, and the depression that the author must have been feeling as they wrote it. And yeah, that you come around to this, you know what? You just got to live, you got to love, and you got to hope, that there is that purpose and there is that God. Joey, last words. All right.
No, I'm good.
You're done. Marty, did you get to say your last?
Yeah, I feel content.
Okay.
I
want to
just sorry, what you guys are saying is essentially like it's kind of goes back to that. I feel like if you try to be smarter than we are, then that's what kind of leads to the nihilistic thoughts. I think sometimes you just have to take the moment be present, right? And I think you do that with prayer, meditation, like going down the rabbit hole of like church history and all that. I felt like the most peace I had is I took a step back from that and went, oh, I have kids I need to take care of, and I have, a family I need to pay attention to. Like, I guess where's your attention? Is your attention on your day-to-day life? And I get a lot more meaning and purpose out of accomplishing tasks than I do getting into philosophy. Like, really, in the end, it's kind of interesting to learn about things, but that's not, when I get done with that, sometimes you can just feel drained and you're just like, but when you get done building a shed, or you get done building something, like ordering chaos, right? That's when you feel good. So anyway.
And I think that's true. We need that kind of a purpose, something to get us from day to day. And it's good to have work. It's good to have family. It's good to have, I like that you brought up meditation just now, Marty. It's good to have a time to just be, and to just enjoy being, to be present, and to experience life and all of your senses. I agree with all of that. I think that's all super important. And I'm thinking that if all of religion disappeared tomorrow, as far as the historical religion and things I've been taught religiously, I would hopefully, I would like to drift in that direction towards this meditation and being and experiencing life, which is a direction that I'm already, trying to very much focus on and be. And I think generally, for our atheist friends, that is where they end up to deal with this kind of nihilistic idea. Is there's a lot more meditation, I think, in the secular world, a feeling of just experiencing life and just being and just knowing this is what you have. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Ecclesiastes, like we were saying, teaches that. And I think that even as religious people, we should just be grateful for what God did give to us and the life that we have, and just be. And so hopefully, if religion disappeared, as we've already said, I think this idea of love your neighbor would show up again. This idea of just be and enjoy life, which I think is kind of love yourself, love your life. The commandment says, love thy neighbor as thyself, which is a 2-part commandment, right? To love your neighbor and to love yourself and your life, And then I agree with you, Joey, that that first great commandment, to love God, and to me that means to have faith in and serve and worship and teach Jesus Christ. But anyway, that commandment, like you said, requires God to reveal himself again. It's something that, because I believe God exists, I do think that would appear again, but it would be through revelation. I'm totally with you on that. And so, I think we've had a good discussion about what would happen. How do you deal with, if your congregation disappears, looking around for your new congregation? And then what happens if religion disappears? And I think hopefully we end up in a place of love and existence and gratitude. And then if God's real, as I believe he is, he then reveals himself and we get back on track again. But all right. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great rest of your Sabbath day.